Good evening from the Explorers Club. I'm Martha Ghio, and here with me is the gentleman who is usually doing these interviews, but tonight he is our special guest. For the past 25 years, he has traveled alone to some of the most remote places in the world, telling stories with his camera. Welcome, Daryl Hawk.
Thank you, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Daryl, why this passion for combining exploration with photography?
Well, it's certainly something that I was born with. I was born with the explorer's gene. They do talk about certain individuals who are born with this kind of gene, and I had to be one of them. I've always been a wanderlust. I've always been fascinated about the world around me. I'm a very curious person. I grew up with National Geographic magazine. I got the subscription at a very young age. And I grew up in a family of world travelers. Both my parents and grandparents traveled the world and went to places that few people had gone to back in the 50s and 60s and even 70s. So these seeds were planted at a very young age. So it seemed inevitable that I would become a world traveler and a photographer as well. My grandfather was a serious photographer, and his photography certainly inspired me. But National Geographic magazine was something that I loved and cherished, and reading about these faraway places always intrigued me. So it didn't take long after college to start setting out on my own adventures, and I've always self-funded most of my adventures and journeys and now expeditions. But it's that important to me. I need to get out and discover the world around me. I need to have adventures. I need to have meaningful experiences with cultures and people who live far different lives than I do. I need this, just like a lot of people need to eat and drink water every day. Well, I do too, but I always need to travel and make discoveries and explore the world around me. So this is something that started at a young age, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to discover my real passions in life, travel and photography.
Well, you just completed an excursion to the northwest frontier of Argentina. Could you tell us a little bit about your preparation for this journey?
Well, there was a lot of preparation involved because, once again, I was going alone, and I like the preparation. I like doing the research. I love looking and poring over maps every day and planning out new routes, new roads, and putting together my own itineraries. And I like learning as much as I can about these faraway places. It's very important because that way when I get there, I feel a lot more confident in what I'm doing. I hit the ground running because there aren't the unexpected surprises or challenges when you've researched a place thoroughly. And that means the weather, that means the landscapes, that means the lighting, the photography possibilities. Safety is always paramount to me, and there are a lot of risks involved quite often with the journeys that I take, being in very remote areas, surrounded by powerful nature, quite often alone. You have to really know what you're doing and understand the world around you. But I'm a very aware person, and I never take foolish risks. And I do a lot of research because my documentaries are so important to me. And so the idea is to get there and shoot nonstop from dawn to dusk and just tell a really nice story, an in-depth documentary about what this place looks like, because I realize that most people don't get to these faraway places or see these areas. So it's my mission and my role to tell the stories and bring back the body of work and let people see for themselves what an amazing world we have around us, and why it's important to protect and preserve the last wild places on Earth, and why it's so important to put aside preserves and large tracts of land and not let them become developed, because these places are disappearing quickly. Just like indigenous cultures and certain languages are disappearing quickly. One of my roles as an explorer is to shed a light on these disappearing landscapes and cultures and show the need and the reasons why we need to protect them.
The images from this Argentina trip, they're spectacular. Before you set out, do you have specific photographic goals?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, part of my research is learning as much as I can about the region and then honing in on all the best areas that lend themselves to great photography. But I've quite often learned that some of the most unexpected places end up yielding the best photographs, as you'll see later tonight, when I made a discovery of a very special mountain. But yeah, the idea is to photograph architecture and people and landscapes and nature and wildlife and wide-angle shots, abstracts. I do it all. I shoot it all. That's the beauty of the documentary, is that every day it's something new and different. You never know what you're going to be waking up to and seeing each day. It's shooting from dawn to dusk. This constant visual stimulation that I'm experiencing really gets my adrenaline going. And when you combine that with adventure and magical experiences with wonderful people along the way, this is a dream come true for me as far as a lifestyle goes. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, Daryl, can you describe for us a typical day in the field for you there?
Well, a typical day certainly is getting up very early before the crack of dawn, because I have to get myself into the best landscapes in that particular area that I'm in that day and photograph the landscape in the early morning sunrise light, because that's when you get your best landscape photos, is sunrise lighting and the hour or so after, and then at the end of the day with the sunset and the sunset lighting as well. So I set my alarm, I get out into these areas early. Sometimes I go completely alone, or quite often I have a driver who I pay for a full day, and he'll take me to the area by car, and I'm shooting for a couple of hours, then come back, maybe have a little breakfast in the car or wherever I'm ending up going that day, and then it's traveling, moving, exploring, hiking, trekking, climbing, you name it. I'm doing it all, boating sometimes, always with the camera around my neck, shooting nonstop, and just telling a really nice story of what this particular area looks like. I take a little break here and there. Sometimes in the midday sun it's a little too harsh to shoot, but by and large I'm probably shooting at least 10 to 12 hours a day. So it's very exhausting, mentally, physically, sometimes emotionally, I guess, because I am alone, and it does get lonely out there, very lonely sometimes, when you're in really remote areas, really cut off from the outside world, and you know that if something were to happen, you could be in trouble, you could be stuck. But I'm very cautious. I don't take a lot of risks. I always do have a good driver or guide with me. And I'm a very aware person. I'm always aware of my surroundings. And if I have any kind of perception of danger or risks that lie ahead, I'm not afraid to turn around and go the other way. So learning to go with the flow and not resist change is an important lesson I've learned over the years. And then at night, after sunset, I go back to the little village or town that I'm staying in and find a good place to eat and get into my bed at night, hopefully by 9 o'clock, transcribe my notes, maybe take a look at my photographs a little, now that I'm able to do that with digital cameras, and maybe read a little, and hopefully go to sleep and get a good 6 hours of sleep if I'm lucky. And then I repeat the whole thing all over again. But every day is different in the sense that it's new people, it's new landscapes, it's new adventures, it's new experiences. So the routine is somewhat the same, but everything else is always different.
Well, tonight's presentation is going to be on Argentina. And what in this particular expedition for you made the trip so memorable?
Well, it was so memorable, I guess, partly because it exceeded my expectations in sheer beauty. It was also memorable. I was just amazed how smoothly everything went from start to finish, because it was a very involved trip. It was the longest journey that I think I've ever taken. It was over 3,000 miles. And I covered a lot of ground, going south of Salta into faraway areas, ruins and remote places. And then I headed back north again, up to the Bolivian border, and photographed that whole part of the region. And then I decided as I was traveling that I was going to go across the Andes, way across the 17,000 foot passes, and descend into Chile, into the Atacama Desert. And because I had been there years ago and I loved it. I loved the Atacama. The landscapes are like Mars, surreal, and beautiful, with geysers everywhere in certain regions. So I crossed into Chile as well, and that was an amazing experience, crossing the Andes on these remote roads, getting into these high altitude altiplano areas with these mesmerizing lakes that I never wanted to leave, so blue and green, and the strong wind was really winning my heart, and it was hard to leave, but I knew I had to keep going on my journey because I had a lot more ground to cover and get back to Salta by a certain time. But the most unexpected and amazing part of my journey was certainly discovering a 14-colored mountain. This was just something that came totally out of the blue. I was prepared to see a 7-colored mountain, Martha. I had read about it, I had researched it, I was excited to circumnavigate it and photograph it in every way possible. And I did see the 7-colored mountain. And I had a great experience there, and I came back with a lot of great photos. But one morning after breakfast, 2 days later, the Quechuan Indian told me that there's a 14-colored mountain in a faraway part of Argentina that very few people had ever seen before. But he thought I would be quite interested, being a photographer. It was a very difficult road. It wasn't an easy place to get to. But the rewards would be tremendous because he knows people who have seen it and could not believe their eyes. And I said, a 14-colored mountain? How can that be? He said, go there and see it. Mount Hornical. So first thing I'm doing is convincing my driver to take me there. I had to pay him 3 times as much as he normally wanted each day. But he took me there on those roads, and when you see what those roads look like, you'll know what I'm talking about, how difficult it is. But once I got there and I saw that mountain range in the distance, I could not believe my eyes. These were mountains that moved me beyond my wildest imagination. And when I got up close to the mountains and photographed them in every way possible, I just had to sit and catch my breath. I told my driver, I'm not leaving for hours. I am staying here. I am going to really reflect and absorb this scene, this experience, this landscape, because I may never be back here again. And to be honest with you, if I had it my way, I would have started walking towards the mountains and would have loved nothing more than to spend a week just in the mountains. But that wasn't possible, because we didn't have food or water or the proper provisions. So instead, I sat down and I wrote a poem, which I hadn't done in 10 years. And I'm going to share that poem with everybody tonight. But that was, without a doubt, the most amazing discovery and experience on this journey through Argentina.
Yeah, well, it sounds marvelous. The Explorers Club flag has been carried by club members since 1918. And that's a long history of courage and accomplishment. It's really a great honor. In 2004, you carried the flag through Bhutan. How was that experience, and what did it mean to you?
Well, it was a tremendous experience. It was probably the most important journey or expedition I've ever taken because of all the aspects and variables and things that took place during this month in 2004. Bhutan was a place that I learned about right here at the Explorers Club through a good friend of mine who had been there. And I was so fascinated by this really remote country cut off by time, high in the Himalayas, a Buddhist kingdom, still relatively untouched by time between Tibet and India. And me being the adventurer and loving peaceful cultures, Buddhism, I have a great respect for. And everything that Bhutan had to offer and I was reading about. This was the closest place that I could get to that really was a lot like James Hilton's Lost Horizon, and a real Shangri-La waiting for me. It was my destiny to go to Bhutan. It had to be, because the way everything fell into place. There's no other possible reason behind it. Getting a sponsor right away through the Explorers Club, having this sponsor well connected to the royal family and the government officials of the country. So I had access to monasteries and all these places that are cut off from travelers or Westerners, I was able to see and photograph. And also being a guest of the royal family allowed me to interview the Prime Minister of the country for an hour. And then we just sat and talked casually, and I had some good questions that I went there because I was concerned about Bhutan's future. And I came away feeling a lot more confident about the future of Bhutan after the Prime Minister did answer those questions. And then I had other interviews with other ministers who are still my friends today. And then also, just these other things that took place each and every day, being on the same route and the same track as the chief abbot for several days, and seeing the smoke in the distance. He was always a little bit ahead of me. But when I got to these monasteries, he was there. And I got photographs of him. He just happened to be moving from his summer home to his winter home the same time I was. And learning important things from children and people along the way about the real meaningness of happiness. You see, in Bhutan, the national motto is gross national happiness. And this was another reason I really had to get to Bhutan, because it just fascinated me that the whole culture revolved around happiness, because to me, that's really about the most important thing in life, besides health, is happiness. But it's always a challenge to really be happy all the time. And so to get to a country where the idea is that everybody's going to be happy, or should be happy, and it's a priority for the king to make sure his people are happy, really intrigued me. So when you combine all these amazing things and the body of photographs that I got, it was a photographer's paradise, and you combine that with the adventures and meeting the queen of the Bhutan Valley and meeting the world's leading historian on Bhutan, Francois Pomerantz, who took me to the queen of the Bhutan Valley and her palace, and then seeing the festivals, the tetsus that were cut off from Westerners. These were tetsus that few people had seen before. Dances with all kinds of robes and costumes and masks, the making of the masks. And then the whole idea of traversing this country from one end to another hadn't been done by many people. And so that was a big part of my thesis, if you will, of trying to get the Explorers Club flag, was to take this flag all the way from the border of India, across Bhutan, and traverse it from west to east, which I did successfully. And just beating out the snows, I was very lucky, because if I had waited another week, those passes would have been snowed in, and it would have been very difficult to get back to the one and only airport in Bhutan.
Well, it sounds marvelous. Any new adventures on the horizon?
Oh, Martha, there's always new adventures for me. I always have at least 2 or 3 planned and ready to go. The maps are always circled and ready to move on. And there's one particular place, though, I've been dreaming about going to for probably about 7 years now. And I'm not sure why I haven't gotten there yet, but I am going in April. And I'm really excited about it. It's a place called Ladakh. It's in northern India. It's all Buddhist. It's sort of like the way Tibet used to be. And it's saddled between Pakistan and Tibet, in the very northern part of India. And I'm going to be doing another traverse all the way from the Pakistani border to the Tibetan border. And I'll be crossing the highest motorable passes in the world. I'll be doing a lot of hiking, trekking, driving. I will have a guide and a driver who will take me most of the way. But I'm really expecting a lot of incredible adventures, because I'll be going to areas that have been relatively untouched by Westerners. I've already got the routes planned. I've been in touch with organizations that I'm going to support and promote once I get there, like the Snow Leopard Conservancy. And the possibility of even seeing a snow leopard is hopefully going to be one of my goals that I'll achieve. They know where to go in these national parks, and I hope to photograph and maybe see a snow leopard. And I want to support the Ladakh project, which I feel very strongly about, which encourages and teaches people the importance of sustainable living, and why that's important more than ever now in today's world. because Ladakhis are too threatened and concerned about westernization encroaching on their society. And so I'm going to be going there doing an in-depth documentary, coming back and showing the beauty of Ladakh, the landscapes, the people, the cultures, and the need and the importance of protecting and preserving this part of the world now.
Well, can't wait to hear about that when you come back. Daryl, is there anything that you might like to say to some of our younger viewers who may be thinking about joining the Explorers Club?
I would say, come on down here to 70th Street and between Park and Madison right away, because you're going to walk through these doors and you're going to be going back in time 100 years to an impressive club that's full of great history of all the world's great explorers are a part or were a part of this club. And exploration is more important than ever before. In a fast-changing world, the explorers are out there in the most remote places, discovering things every day, in space, in the underwater world, mountains, remote countries. It's endless. And we have so many important things going on here at the club. And by coming to the club and being a part of the club, you can get involved. You don't have to be an explorer per se. You can become a student member or an associate explorer. And all you really need to do is support the goals of the club. And once you get involved with the club and get involved with some of the projects, then you could work your way up to becoming an explorer by meeting explorers and joining them on expeditions. And one thing will lead to the next. And I can't tell you how many amazing people I've met and world-renowned explorers I've met and interviewed over the last 20 years since I've been a member. I'm always excited to come here. I've always referred to this place as my home away from home. I really do feel at home here. I love the Explorers Club. And when you walk through these doors and these rooms and you see the artwork and the artifacts and the flags of the most important expeditions that have ever taken place, you can't help but be moved.
Yes, it's a spectacular place, definitely. Well, Daryl, thank you so much for talking, and I look forward to your lecture tonight, and it's been a great pleasure.
Well, thank you, Martha. It was really enjoyable having you interview me, and I really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.